Our final speaker today is Don O'Sullivan, Professor of Marketing at Melbourne Business School. You'll hear in Don's accent that he hails from Cork in Ireland, but he has called Melbourne home for the past 14 years. Don has had an illustrious career in marketing. He specialises in service marketing and the impact marketing activities have on company performance. His research has been published in leading international journals, including the Journal of Marketing and the Journal of the Academy of Marketing Science. In his spare time, Don also works as a corporate educator and consultant. Please welcome Don O'Sullivan to the forum as he shares his presentation, 21st Century CX, Why Process Alone Won't Yield Customer Centricity. Over to you, Don.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everybody. It's really nice to be with you today, and I've been looking forward to the event and listening to the speakers so far today. I spent the last 30-odd years looking at researching and consulting around customers. A lot of my time is spent kind of working in very dense academic studies of what drives customer behavior and what makes customers think positively and negatively about organizations and stay with organizations and leave organizations. And a lot of it really is about kind of coming down to the last degree of uncertainty about drivers. So it's very dense stuff that I do. So when I get a chance to speak to industry, I tend to go in the completely opposite direction. So I'm going to talk to you in very kind of plain language, to the point where sometimes I worry when I talk at industry events, I come across like the professor of the blindingly obvious. So hopefully you'll see that as my attempt to edit out the kind of econometric modeling that I spend the rest of my time involved in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of put a few propositions to you, and hopefully they'll kind of at least get you to reflect, and then I'll give you why I think it's true. But at no point am I going to hopefully drag you into the weeds of kind of the data-heavy environment that I live in. So so hopefully you can see my deck at this point, and what I'm going to try and argue for you today, well, basically three things. I think that in my experience, the largest barriers to customer centricity are, number one, all of the things that we know. The second barrier I think we encounter is customers' absolutely unreasonable expectations, just unreasonable, erratic, ungrounded, and unpredictable. And then the third barrier to customer centricity is everything we do to improve performance. So they'd be the three key things I'd like you to take from this talk in this 35 minutes. Is the first one is the curse of knowledge. It's that what we know is probably the biggest barrier of all to customer centricity and how we manage it. When the lockdown finally ended, my then 16-year-old daughter asked me if I'd go for a walk with her, and I said certainly, and I went. So I just need to get a top, and we'll head out. So I went upstairs, and I had a little cry for myself because she'd been ignoring me through the entirety of the lockdown, and when I pulled myself together, we headed off, and it quickly became apparent that the walk, well, she wanted to go for a walk with my credit card, and just that I was attached to it, so I got to come along. And we ended up in this sports shop inside town. And Ava was very keen on buying the pair of runners on the left. And I thought she should buy the pair of runners on the right. And that conversation became surprisingly animated in a very short amount of time. And I was trying to point out to her that, look, the runners on the left, they've got white soles, white rubber soles, and so have the runners on the right. And the runners on the right have these nice diagonal dots that you can see in the runners on the left, and they've got white laces and leather uppers. she listened patiently for a while, and then I finally felt the ground giving way underneath me when I said, "But sweetheart, they're cool." And at that point, she just looked at me and just slightly curled her lip in a way that suggested that that was me done anyway. So I headed off up to the till. And as I walked out of the store, and I was thinking, what the hell happened there? And I kind of realized that I had done what I see organizations do all the time, which is I turned to what I knew. I don't know if any of you've got a teenage daughter, but it's like a slot machine as to what's going to happen next. You know, the person that goes to bed at night has got absolutely no relationship to the person who wakes up the next day. And I'm meant to be ready. I'm meant to be there, empathic, understanding. And it's it's certainly not boring. So that's all data. That information is lost to me. Like I'm clueless as a parent as to what's going on. But in this situation, I had access to firm data around the shoes. So I knew about the shoes. So like my kind of grip went to the shoes as I tried to hang in there. And I talked about leather, rubber soles and leather toppings and diagonal stripes. It's just like, it put me at the furthest possible point away from her, because I was starting with a product insight instead of a customer insight. Ava was having an emotional experience that was looking for benefits and needs and products. And I had started with products that I tried to attach to needs, that I linked to benefits, that I said would deliver emotional outcomes. You will be cool. And at that point, I'd lost all my credibility. And I think that's the challenge we have when we think about customer centricity. It's not about what we don't know, because I think when it comes to customers, so much of it is disorganized, varying, and we actually lie a lot because we aggregate it in a way we said this is what the customer thinks. And that's it, we just lie. We just say that the noise will cancel itself out, and this is absolutely empirically the case. I think there's a real attraction to what we know with certainty, and what we know with certainty is nothing to do with the customer. It's typically to do with what we produce. And there we've got high levels of accurate, stable, quality data. And I think that's the curse of knowledge. I think it puts us at the furthest possible point away from our customers. And I think if we're to bridge that gap, it requires an incredible level of professionalism and thoughtfulness and care as we try and measure what it is we do with our customers. And I do think, by the way, I think CSBA do a really good job on that. But I think it's a challenging job because we're battling the curse of knowledge. Like if I knew nothing, I often think that if companies knew nothing, they'd be able to deal with their customers better than if they knew something. The something is typically around the product. And the more they know about the product, the less they're willing to deal with the uncertainties around their customers. So I think the first challenge when you think about customer centricity is not what you don't know, it's actually what you do know. I think customer data is battling, it's not contributing into a vacuum, it's battling to get attention in an information-rich environment. But that information tends to be process-oriented, it tends to be internally oriented. And that then leads to what you could call like a spotlight effect, which is executive teams make decisions based on the data that they've got available to them. It's like, which becomes weird because it ends up being like a drunk looking for their keys under a light shade, under a lamp, What are you doing? I'm looking for my keys. Well, did you lose them there? No, but that's where the light is. That's where the data is. And that was like me with my daughter in the shoes. Where did I have data? Okay, well, that's where I'm going from. That's what I've got, and I'm going to give it a swing with the available data. Rather than thinking about what data do I need, it's what data do I have. It's probably best kind of articulated by Clayton Christensen when he talked about the job to be done. We very often think about our customers as people who buy products and as people who happen to be human. And I think it's better to think of them as humans who are getting a job done, and they happen to be buying a product, and therefore they happen to be consumers. Every time I say that, I think it's incredibly trite when I say it. And I think it's kind of almost an implicit conceit within a lot of conversations where you think about this person as a customer who happens to be human. And that's such a limiting, understandable, but limiting proposition. So maybe rather than me banging on about it, maybe I'll just let the late, great Christensen speak to it. So many of you will be kind of familiar with what I'm about to show you, but I'll show it anyway, because I think it's good. And it doesn't last very long, so have a listen to this.
Of motivating customers to buy what we're offering. So I wanted just to tell you a story about a project we did for one of the big fast food restaurants. They were trying to goose up the sales of their milkshakes. They had just studied this problem up the gazoo. They brought in customers who fit the profile of the quintessential milkshake consumer. And they'd give them samples and ask, could you tell us how we can improve our milkshakes so you'd buy more of them? Do you want it chocolatey or cheaper, chunkier, chewier? They get very clear feedback. They would then improve the milkshake on those dimensions, and it had no impact on sales or profits whatsoever. So one of our colleagues went in with a different question on his mind, and that was, I wonder what job arises in people's lives that cause them to come to this restaurant to hire a milkshake. So we stood in a restaurant for 18 hours one day and just took very careful data. What time did they buy these milkshakes? What were they wearing? Were they alone? Did they buy other food with it? Did they eat it in the restaurant or drive off with it? It turned out that nearly half of the milkshakes were sold before 8 o'clock in the morning. The people who bought them were always alone. It was the only thing they bought, and they all got in the car and drove off with it. So to figure out what job they were trying to hire it to do, we came back the next day and stood outside the restaurant so we could confront these folks as they left, milkshake in hand. And in language that they could understand, we essentially asked, excuse me, please, but I got to sort this puzzle out. What job were you trying to do for yourself that caused you to come here and hire that milkshake? And they'd struggle to answer, so we'd then help them by asking other questions like, well, think about the last time you were in the same situation, needing to get the same job done, but you didn't come here to hire a milkshake. What did you hire? And then as we put all of their answers together, it became clear that they all had the same job to do in the morning, and that is they had a long and boring drive to work. And they just needed something to do while they drove to keep the commute interesting. One hand had to be on the wheel, but somebody had given them another hand and there wasn't anything in it. And they just needed something to do while they drove. They weren't hungry yet, but they knew they'd be hungry by 10 o'clock. So they also wanted something that would just pull down there and stay for their morning. Good question. What do I hire when I do this job? You know, I've never framed the question that way before, but last Friday I hired a banana to do the job. Take my word for it, never hire bananas. They're gone in 3 minutes, you're hungry by 7:30. If you promise not to tell my wife, I probably hire donuts twice a week, but they don't do it well either. They're gone fast, they crumb all over my clothes, they get my fingers gooey. Sometimes I hire bagels, but as you know, they're so dry and tasteless. Then I have to steer the car with my knees while I'm putting jam on them, and then if the phone rings, we got a crisis. I remember I hired a Snickers bar once, but I felt so guilty I've never hired Snickers again. Let me tell you, when I come here and hire this milkshake, it is so viscous that it easily takes me 20 minutes to suck it up that thin little straw. Who cares what the ingredients are? I don't. All I know is I'm full all morning and it fits right here in my cup holder. Well, it turns out that the milkshake does the job better than any of the competitors, which in the customer's minds are not Burger King milkshakes, but it's bananas, donuts, bagels, Snickers bars, coffee, and so on. But I hope you can see how, if you understand the job, how to improve the product becomes just obvious.
So hopefully that gives you a kind of sense of what I see as being the challenge of the curse of knowledge. We very often think about consumers as consuming a product rather than getting a job to be done. I think if we are going to be interested in customer experience, we've got to think of them as humans doing a job rather than implicitly thinking of them as customers consuming a product, and recognizing that that's where the preponderance of our data is around them as customers consuming a product. And I would say that the ability to make that shift is quickly becoming a source of competitive advantage. I think Satya Nadella of Microsoft probably puts it well when he talks about, our core job is to meet the unmet, unarticulated needs of our customers. I thought it was really impressive, the last presentation, about the amount of innovation that's going on in this sector. But if you're going to innovate, it can't be an innovation around manifest demand for stuff that they're already consuming. How do I innovate unarticulated, unmet needs? And I think that's the real value of customer centricity, is if I can get close enough to them that I can meet those unmet needs. Which kind of brings me to the second challenge you face, is that you're trying to get empathy with a customer that's got absolutely ridiculous and unreasonable expectations. And again, I think my daughter probably is a good kind of true north for me there, right? I'm trying to maintain empathy with a 16-year-old person who is just completely unreasonable. Last year, it's estimated that $8.3 billion was spent on CX tech alone, just the tech. I would conservatively estimate that you can put a 5x against that when you put in the process changes that would have gone with it and the implementations. That's just the tech. You'd think with all of that expenditure, customers would be kind of happier. But Gartner did a study last year, a broad-based study of consumers across the economy. How would you rate your last consumption or purchase occasion? It was difficult. So you have all of this money going in one side, and yet you've got these incredible disquiet amongst customers. And I think the reason they're unreasonable is not because of what you're doing, it's because of what they're experiencing elsewhere. Their expectations are being set by Netflix. Now, Netflix, it knows them well enough to make the correct recommendation. So when I sat down last night, I was tired, and at the end of the night, I flicked on Netflix, and it basically told me what to watch. I watched it, I enjoyed it. I expect that level of intimacy from Netflix. And then when I go to my bank, I expect them to have the same. Airbnb can feed me the kinds of places that it knows not only that I'll book, but also that I like. So they can predict pretty accurately what my rating is going to be before I go there. Now, if Airbnb have that level of intimacy, that level of responsiveness, that ability to curate offers to me, then why is it that when I go to a restaurant, I'm not getting that level of service? Or why, if I go to my utility provider, can I not get that level of service? If Apple can allow me to get rid of money, if Apple can let me pay with a watch, if Apple can tell me how my health is, then why is it that my car can't do that? So it's unreasonable if we think about customers' expectations as being a function of their last experience with you. What makes it unreasonable is that their expectations are being determined by the best experience they had anywhere. That's what makes it unreasonable. And it is unreasonable. I came here 15 years ago, and it was a really great time in our lives because the kids were still human, hadn't turned into teenagers. So I was driving around in the car, and there were 4 fights. Get out the map. Where is the map? Then orientate the map. It's upside down. Then where are we on the map? We're here, we're there. And where do we want to go on the map? There, no, here. How do we get there? This way, that way. It was just like World War II every time we took out a map. But if I take out a map today, I expect the map to know where I am. I expect it to know what the orientation is. When I start typing, I expect it to know where I'm going. And I expect it to be able to tell me the best way to get there. First time that happened to me, it just blew my mind. The second time it happened to me, I just thought, well, that's how maps work. So the best expectation that they're having in any other sector is what's setting their expectation about what's going to happen in your sector. And your biggest competitor, in terms of customers' expectations, is probably something like Amazon. Last Father's Day, my wife unwelded my son from PlayStation for long enough to get him to go out and buy me a book so that I would think that he liked me. And he gave me a book, lovely wrapped book. And again, I'm not a big crier, but I cried again on that occasion. Give me a book, lovely wrapping. He said, "Daddy, I love you." And the reason I cried is that earlier that morning, Jeff Bezos had sent me an email saying, "Don, we think you like these books." And I realized that Jeff Bezos had a better understanding of me than my own son. And I expect organizations to kind of have that deep, deep, deep understanding of me. And when I go to the next organization, you know, if I go log on to my Qantas account, why don't they have the same understanding of me? And I think the net effect of all of this is that effort becomes the source of advantage. And if you're process improving, are you improving the supply side or demand side of your process? Because process improvements should look to eliminate cognitive, temporal, emotional, and physical effort. That's why customers leave organizations. They're the four big buckets. If you make me think, if you make me do, if you make me feel, if you waste my time, they're all sources of effort that drive attrition. And the challenge is that the sensitivity that customers have to these sources of effort incrementally increases as a function of what experiences they're having externally. So the real opportunity is, how do you improve processes to drive down those sources of effort instead of improving processes such that you're outsourcing your problems onto your customers? And very often that's what happens when you improve process, because all of the data is on the internal part of the process improvement, leading to improvement being something that happens in inverted commas rather than actual improvement. And I think maybe compounding that is this idea of incremental improvement. Incremental improvement is probably the single kind of most dangerous idea in CX, because companies love to track your performance relative to last year when expectations are basically unrelated to performance relative to last year. They're related to best performance elsewhere. What's the net effect of that? I think the net effect of it, and again, I apologize now, I kind of gave you I led you in with some nice pictures and stories, and now I'm showing you a graph. So I apologize if I'm doing this, causing you cognitive effort on an afternoon. Simple question is, if you just look at it there are things you do that fulfill a customer's needs, and if you don't do them, they're dissatisfied, and if you do them, they're delighted. And the question you want to ask yourself is, which one of these quadrants am I playing in? Are we in the bottom left-hand quadrant, where we're trying to get rid of dissatisfaction, or are we in the top right-hand quadrant, where we're trying to deliver delight? In my experience, most organizations' operating assumption is that they're in the top right-hand quadrant. In my experience, most organizations are in the bottom left-hand quadrant. There's a fundamental difference between the top right-hand quadrant and the bottom left-hand quadrant, namely that in the bottom left-hand quadrant, you're dealing with hygienes. Hygienes. Most organizations should be addressing their hygienes. Most organizations tend to operate on the assumption that they're addressing motivators. The key kind of low cognitive effort thing to take from this is that you get zero return on investment from improving your motivators unless your hygienes are present. It's all about the hygienes. It's almost invariably about the hygienes. Now, I'm at risk of bringing you into the empirics, but I won't. You just have to trust me, unless you want to be bored by me, that customers leave companies because of the absence of hygienes. But companies, because they're convinced that they have loyal customers, tend to operate from motivators. If you got nothing else out of my talk, and what would I kind of know after 30 years of looking at customer behavior, it's that. It's you should operate on the assumption that I'm on the bottom left-hand quadrant. Almost all organizations are, progressively so because of these unrealistic customer expectations. Because what you think is a motivator, very often your customers think of as hygienes. They're not nice to haves anymore. Just because you never had them before doesn't mean they're not a nice to have. They're very quickly becoming a have to have on the part of your customers. I'll jump on beyond that. The third point I wanted to make to you was this idea of initiatives to improve performance. I hope we know we've got time to do this, but hopefully we will. Here I thought I'd take the example of Amazon, simply because it's the most customer obsessed business in the world. And that customer obsession has allowed them to grow in a manner that's kind of unintelligible otherwise. I mean, it's a book company until it's not. It's an everything company. And you think, how does a book company improve process and then become an everything company? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And it is an everything company. And I think it comes down to what's the organizing principle for these process improvements. So what I thought I'd do is ask you to listen or watch again. This is a much shorter clip. So this is Jeff Bezos, and this is from a very long form interview. But to be honest, anytime he gets more than 10 minutes to talk, he'll say exactly the same thing. He outlines what are the 4 core capabilities that underpin the success of this incredibly successful company. And I just want you to, I'm going to ask you a question afterwards, and I'd like you to contribute through chat. Which of the 4 core capabilities you'd say you find it easiest to line up against? So we'll have to listen to him first, and then we'll have the chat.
Competition. So let me, I have always heard, I think from you, but from many others.
Sorry, I need to move that along.
It's so hard to be good at one.
Genuine customer obsession. So like every single thing you just mentioned, when our senior executives sit down and review those programs, they're looking for customer obsession. How is it? Second one that we're focused on is invention. We don't like to do Me Too offerings. We'll be inspired by something we see in the world. We're not hermetically sealed, but we want to put our own twist on it. We want to try to do something better for customers that's pioneering. So where is the invention? Why is this going to be better for customers than the already whatever is serving that need in the world today? And then a willingness to think long term. So I'm very focused on those things, and also the operational excellence, reducing defects at their root. Those are the things, that's the culture of Amazon. It's the habits that we have. Those are the things I'm focused on. And those are the things that all of our senior people are focused on. They've been at the company for a long time, and I'm incredibly lucky because I get to work with what are effectively paid volunteers. The senior team at Amazon, most of them have been in the company for 10 plus years, and they've ridden the stock appreciation of Amazon. They can all go, sip pina coladas on a beach for the rest of their life if they want to, and I'm very grateful to them that they choose not to, because they do it because it's fun, and we're building things. We have so many talented people, and the common thread in all of those things is our approach. And so, Amazon Web, I would definitely advise a small startup company to be as narrow and as focused as is possible to be. If you look at the original Amazon business plan, there was no hint of anything other than books in it, and it was not on my radar. I was thinking, I wanted to build an online bookstore. That was it. And, it worked way better than I thought it would, and we launched music, and that worked better than I thought it would, and we launched videos. I think it's so long ago I can really remember. I think it was actually VHS tapes. Is that possible? And that worked better than we thought it would. And then I sent email to customers. So I picked about 1,000 customers, and I said, besides the things we sell today, books, music, and video, what would you like to see us sell? And the list came back incredibly long tail. It was almost like whatever was on their mind at the moment. It was like, I wish you sold windshield wipers for my car. And I was like, really? Windshield wipers? That wasn't on the business plan, but that's an interesting idea. And so today, we basically, if you're buying your windshield wipers anywhere else, you're probably getting ripped off. So it's been, kind of one foot in front of the other. And then sometimes.
So I'm going to stop it there, okay? So there are the 4 capabilities that he speaks about. So customer obsession, invention, long-term orientation, and operational excellence. The question I've got for you is, which of those 4 would you most readily say that your organization possesses? And in helping you to try and think about which of these 4, and maybe it's unreasonable now to ask you to enter it into chat, but we'll give it a go anyway and see how we are. To help you kind of to think about these, I always find it helpful to think, well, what's the alternative, right? What's the, like, if it's not A, it's got to be B, right? So, but if it's not customer obsession, then most commonly it tends to be an internal obsession or a product obsession or a competitor obsession. They're your kind of, your counterfactuals would be that. And if it's not invention, then it's me too. I meet a lot of organizations that say they're inventing and they're pioneering, but actually, if you look at it, they're doing something that either a competitor did or they've seen exactly the same thing done in another market. So is it me too, or is it pioneering? And then I think every executive team is busy. They're either busy on the long term or they're busy on the short term. So is it, when we look at what we spend our time monitoring, are they very short term indicators or are they long term? And then I guess the only opposite for operational excellence is just your crap host, like you're incompetent. So they're the alternatives. So I'm just going to stop sharing and just ask if anyone's brave enough to put in which one we sign up to. Chris, long term?
Yeah, I was a toss up between that or operational excellence.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. Operational excellence or long-term orientation. Anybody else? Which one would you find most challenging then, say, if we were to switch it up? So I'll come back to you, Chris, but no, I won't ask you, but I'll come back to your comment. But which one of these would you say is most challenging?
Maybe invention.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Chris. So let me share again, and then 2 minutes from done. Okay. So I'll stop then. So I would suggest to you that on the front of it, it is mind-bogglingly weird that the CEO of the world's most successful organization is so transparent about what are the capabilities that enable their success. And I think it's only weird until you realize that operational excellence is the single biggest threat to a long-term orientation, to inventiveness, and to customer obsession. I'll start from the top. If you take the example of the windshield wipers, think about some of your customers going, yeah, we'd like windshield wipers. Like that's going to get binned straight away, right? Because we're not set up for windshield wipers. So I'm going to trade off the operational excellence for the windshield wipers. Think about the invention, pioneering, risk-taking. In operation, I always find it comical, and I shouldn't laugh. Organizations that I go to, they go, look, we build bridges, we can't take risks. We run a bank, we can't take risks. At organizations that we're a dog food company, we can't take risks. So like in the risk-taking piece is an anathema to the operational excellence. So operational excellence brings you into the short term as well, because it's about today. It's about not stuffing up. It's about today. It's about trading off idiosyncratic customers with what we do best. And I would suggest to you that that's the challenge. And that's why I liked the title that I was asked to speak to today, Why Process Improvement Will Not Yield Customer Centricity. Because I think process improvement naturally flows to operational excellence. Promise this is the last thing I'm going to talk about. And I only need a minute to talk about it. That's a very simple model. It's called a product life cycle. I hope that it'll bear some kind of resonance for people. The idea that a product starts, it grows, it matures, it declines. And the only thing I wanted to leave you with is, what are you great at through that process? I meet a lot of startup type organizations, and what they're amazing at. Sorry, let me start that differently. One would think that the organization number 3 is the organization that knows most about its customers, when in fact, the opposite is true. In fact, if organization number 3 knew most about its customers, CSBA would not have a business. The organization that knows most about its customers is organization number 1, even though they have practically no sales and no customers. You go into the executive team of that organization and everybody's eyes are on the prize. Everybody's trying to understand the customer, because the problem we've got is no one's buying what we've got. So you're trying to understand the customer and create a solution. And if that organization is successful, then it starts to achieve growth. And you go into that organization, high growth organizations, and when I go into that kind of an organization, I know what I'm going to find. I'm going to find people who really understand the product because they're scaling the product now that they've got growth. And they really, really understand the product. You go to a software company or an engineering company that's in rapid growth, and that's the product obsession. But by the time you get to the maturity stage, everybody's gone internally to operational excellence because we're making money today. We've got a large organization. We've got many moving parts. We need to know what we're doing at this point. It's scale. It's not about tomorrow. It's got assets that we're delivering results from today. And I think that's the challenge, is how do I maintain operational excellence while at the same time having the customer obsession, the long-term orientation, and the innovativeness that led us to become a large organization in the first place. So that's the easy framing of a hard problem. And that's why I'm an academic, not a practitioner.
Thanks, Don. You are an academic. I feel like I've just been in a university lecture. So thank you for that. Well, uni starts next week, I suppose, doesn't it? Around the country, kicks off. Thank you very much for your time today, Don. I have a very quick question for you, and then I will jump to the next speaker. But in a few sentences, how do we speak to senior teams within our organisations and encourage them to take CX more seriously than what they're doing now?
Yeah. So, and I don't want to diminish what a big question that is and what a challenging issue it is, because I know who I'm speaking to, and it's something that you wrestle with on a daily basis. So please don't take anything I say as an attempt to make the large challenge you face a smaller challenge. I think when it goes well, we don't use the language of customer centricity and customer metrics. I think we use the language of senior executives. And I think senior executives have got assets and opportunities. And if we can position the customer as an asset, and I mean genuinely as an asset, I just don't mean just use the words like customer equity. I mean literally understand the discounted future revenue stream associated with our customer base, and then having very clear logical structure around how we articulate the range of opportunities to enhance the quality of that asset. And I think we're better positioned then to wind them off the curse of knowledge. You know, very often you find executive teams clearly understand the hard assets of the organization. You'd like to be able to complement that with an equal understanding of the intangible assets of the organization. But I don't think the route to getting there is trying to educate them in a new language. I think it's for us to be able to speak in their language. That's at a very kind of simplified level what I would suggest.
Yeah, fantastic. That's always great advice. And thank you so much for your presentation today, Don. Fantastic to see those videos too. very insightful and compelling. So thank you, Don. We will look forward to chatting with you again later. Thank you.